Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us here at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, as we discuss the upcoming Crew-7 mission and Laurel O'Hara's spaceflight to the International Space Station. I'm joined today by several leaders that are going to give us their opening remarks ahead of some media question and answer as we prepare for this upcoming season of spaceflight. Joining me to my left is Ken Bowersox, Associate Administrator for the Space Operations Mission Directorate at NASA Headquarters, Steve Stitch, Manager of the Commercial Crew Program, Joel Montalbano, Manager of the International Space Station, and joining me virtually is Benji Reed, Senior Director for the Human Spaceflight Program at SpaceX. Back in the room, we have Eric Vanderwall, Head of the ESA Houston office, and also online we have Hiroshi Sasaki, Vice President and Director General for the Human Spaceflight Technology Directorate at JAXA. We will start with our opening remarks, and I will turn it over to you, Ken.
Hey, welcome everybody, and thanks for being here today as we get a chance to share a little bit of information with you about our next set of crew rotations to the International Space Station. I'm still amazed every time I read that we've had crews continuously on the International Space Station for almost 23 years. Every one of those years has been a busy year, whether it's been with assembly, maintenance, or with really great science. And I am always impressed with how our teams handle the workload. What we're seeing now in our rhythm is that every late winter, spring, late summer, fall, with crew rotations, it gets especially busy. The team pays extra special attention to all the work going on every minute of the year, but they pay special attention to the launches and returns of the crew. I'm really happy to have representatives of our two major programs, international partners, and our commercial partners on the teleconference today. They're here to share more details than I would be able to share with you. And then after that, you'll be hearing from the crews themselves. One thing I do want to mention right up front is that we've taken a look at the launch date for Crew-7, and we're looking at moving it. Steve here will give you more details on that launch date adjustment. But I wanted to thank you one more time for joining us, and now I'll pass over to Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. It's an honor to be here today representing all the commercial crew program team across the country. I can't thank the NASA team enough for all their hard work getting ready for Crew-7, the NASA and the SpaceX team preparing the vehicles for flight, doing all the analysis and getting us ready to do now our 7th crew rotation flight. As Ken said, we are going to adjust the launch date a few days to the right. SpaceX is flying an EchoStar mission. It's a Falcon 9 Heavy off the same launch pad that we're going to use, pad 39A. That EchoStar vehicle is undergoing processing right now for a launch on Wednesday evening Eastern time. And so because of the turnaround of the launch pad from that Falcon 9 Heavy configuration to the configuration we use for Crew, we'll adjust the launch date to the 17th of August. And so that launch time on August the 17th will be 6:56 a.m. Eastern time, with a docking one day later at about 2:45 a.m. Eastern time as well. That'll set us up for the crew handover, and then we'll undock the Dragon, the Crew-6 Dragon with Steve Bowen and his crew on the 25th of August. The vehicles are getting ready for and being prepared for flight. All the hardware is at the Kennedy Space Center at Dragonland for flight. I got a chance to talk to the crew this morning, and you'll hear from them later today. They're excited and ready to support the launch. The Dragon that we're going to use is flying its 3rd flight, and Dragon Endeavour. It recently flew on Crew-5, and then we'll have a new booster for the Falcon 9 first stage, and obviously a new second stage, and all that hardware is being prepared for flight. We'll start our flight readiness reviews in earnest. Joel will have his first review this week, and then the commercial crew program FRR will be on August the 4th, and then we'll set up for an agency FRR likely on the 11th of August. And so we're going through that process. It's really an honor for the commercial crew program to fly for the first time. Each of our international partners will have an ESA crew member on this flight. a JAXA crew member on this flight and then a Roscosmos crew member, so it's an honor to have those flying for this flight. Also, we'll have our first pilot. Andy Mogensen will be the pilot from ESA, and I know Eric will talk more about that. We're getting excited and ready to go for the flight. I would say one thing, the launch opportunities are a little bit unique for this particular time frame. It's a busy time frame on ISS like it always is, and so we'll have launch opportunities on the 17th and 18th, and then we'll have to take a little bit of a break to allow some progress operations at the space station. And then we would pick back up on the 21st with a launch opportunity, and then we would stand down again for some progress operations, and we would pick back up around the 25th of August with a set of launch opportunities. For us, it's an important time frame in NASA. There's an important Psyche mission also down the road, and a science mission that's going to launch in October, and so we've been working very closely with the launch support program to set up for that mission as well. So again, I'm excited to be here and excited for the mission, and the crew is ready to go, and they're excited as well, and I'll turn it over to Joel Montalbano.
Hey, thank you, Ken, and thank you, Steve, and thank you for joining us today. You know, as we said, we're here to talk about the next couple handover missions. And so Crew-7, an integrated crew, as Steve talked to you about, they'll stay docked to the International Space Station about 190 days or so. Might be a little 193 or so, but 190 days. They'll dock to the Zenith port, or the docking port on top of Space Station. They'll have a 5-day handover with the Crew-6 team. And so where they'll be handing over all the critical knowledge that they've gained while they were on board Space Station. And then Crew-7 will be rocking and rolling after that with a well-versed science and research program that we have. Looking to the Soyuz mission, looking at mid-September for that. Laurel, a NASA astronaut, will be flying on the Soyuz. They'll also be docked to the International Space Station about 190 days. To me, it's exciting to continue the integrated crew work that we started about a year ago or so. So continue to have Roscosmos cosmonauts on the Dragon vehicle and U.S. astronauts on the Russian Soyuz vehicle. Looking just the next couple of weeks, we have the Northrop Grumman 19 mission scheduled to launch Tuesday, August 1st at 8:31 Eastern Time out of Wallops Island. So continuing the critical supply done by the Cygnus spacecraft. We also have a Russian EVA scheduled for August 9th on board the International Space Station. Sergei and Dmitry will be installing some debris panels on board one of the Russian modules, so looking forward to that. Earlier this morning, about 8 o'clock Central, we had a power problem in the Mission Control Center Houston, where we lost command, telemetry, and voice to the International Space Station from Mission Control Center Houston. On board, it wasn't an issue on board, it was purely a ground problem. We did talk to the crew. We were able to talk to the crew through Russian assets about 20 minutes after the failure, explain to them what was going on. At no time was the crew or the vehicle in any danger. We have been doing some upgrades at Johnson Space Center in order to add some reliability to our power systems. Today, and some reconfiguration is when we lost the power, the telemetry, the command, and the voice to the International Space Station. We knew this work was going on, and in preparation for that, we have the backup command and control system that we would use if we have to close the center for a weather emergency, especially important during the hurricane season. That hardware was ready to go, and the team transitioned to that hardware. And within about 90 minutes, we were up and running with full command, telemetry, and voice to the International Space Station. We'll spend today studying what happened, understanding the problem and the fix, and my hope is by the end of the day, we'll be up to a nominal configuration. Again, no impact to what the safety of the crew or the safety of the vehicle, and we'll better understand what happened and then take lessons learned and move forward. In closing, just a huge thanks to the international partners, to SpaceX, the Commercial Crew Program, my colleagues in the International Space Station program. It's exciting to continue flying on board with the integrated crews, and we're just excited to be here. So with that, let me hand it over to Benji over at SpaceX.
Thank you, Joel. And thank you, everybody. It's always good to be on these briefings and have the opportunity to participate. As always, this continues to be an exciting, increasingly exciting time in human spaceflight. And as we move into our seventh operational mission on the CCP program, I think it bears saying, our deep gratitude to NASA for having the opportunity to be a partner moving into the seventh operational flight, and to all of the different members of the International Space Station. It's fantastic to be able to work with all of them and be able to transport their crews. So again, thank you very much from all of us here at SpaceX. In terms of Crew-7 readiness, we're moving along as planned. The crew members completed their test drive over this past weekend. That's when they have an opportunity to sit in their Dragon for the first time, complete it on the inside and check it all out and make sure that they feel ready, that their vehicle is ready for them to fly in and for them to identify anything that they need. And that went very well. So the next thing to talk about, a couple of issues I wanted to bring up just to note that we identified. So in June, early June, I think it was June 6th, we had an incident on some of our hardware at the pad at 39A, a ground equipment issue. It was basically the system that we use to densify liquid oxygen propellants uses a heat exchanger that involves liquid nitrogen. And in that situation, what happened was some of the liquid nitrogen was trapped in a line, and of course, when that liquid boils off, turns to a gas, it increases the pressure significantly, and we had a rupture in that line. There was no active work occurring at the time. The area was clear of personnel. No NASA Kennedy property was damaged, and everything since then has been, we resolved that issue, and everything since has been reopened and it's fully tested and ready for work. We changed the configuration a little bit in that hardware so we wouldn't have that kind of a trapped liquid nitrogen issue again. So that's all resolved, and we're ready to go for Crew-7. The other issue that I wanted just to talk a little bit about today is the isolation valve on Cirrus 28. We noted that there had been an isolation valve that remained on throughout the mission. It's important to understand that this particular valve is located in the manifold near the Draco engine, and it's only used if there is a thruster valve leak. Okay, so since there was no leak during the mission, so there was really no need to have the isolation valve didn't have to serve any purpose. So even though it was stuck on or stuck open, it didn't impact the mission at all. There was no leak of any kind of propellant. We're proactively inspecting isolation valves across all of the Dragon vehicles, including those that came from the Cirrus 28 capsule. And one of the things that we've identified is some corrosion in certain units. So we're undergoing a lot of testing to determine the cause of the corrosion, any impact to the valve operation in general and any specific valves. And also we're investigating methods to prevent any of that kind of corrosion in the future. It's important to note that we immediately tested all of the manifold isolation valves that are on the Crew-6 Dragon that's in orbit right now. And we continue to do so as part of our normal maintenance and pre-departure checkout procedures. At this point, no anomalous behavior has been identified in any of those valves, and they're all operating, opening and closing appropriately. And so we feel confident in the Crew-6 vehicle that is on station. We feel confident in the Crew-7 vehicle that's about to fly. With that, I can say that overall, not only Dragon, but also the Falcon 9 and all of our pad systems and our teams are going through their final preparations, and they're getting ready for flight. We will continue to work closely with NASA and with all of our SpaceX teams to ensure that we're ready to fly. And we'll only fly when we're ready, and we'll only fly when it's safe to fly the crew members. We'll continue our mini tests and reviews that we've been doing. These always give us an opportunity to step back, review the data, listen to the hardware, and mitigate any risks prior to having a safe flight. So we'll make sure we do that as we move through these steps in the next few weeks. And one more time again, huge thank you to NASA And thank you to ESA, JAXA, and Roscosmos, and of course the 45th for their trust and their partnership and their close collaboration on the Crew-7 launch. Thank you.
Thank you, Benji. And now back in the room, we will hear from Eric Vanderwall.
Thank you. Good morning. As mentioned before, we have ESA astronaut Andy Mogensen that will fly for ESA on this flight. There's a first for him. He flew in 2015 on a 10-day mission to the ISS, but this time it will be a long-duration 6-month flight. He's very excited, and ESA is excited too. For us, there is also a first. Steve stole my thunder a little bit, but Andy will be the first ESA astronaut and first non-US astronaut to pilot the Dragon vehicle. We're very proud of that, and Andy is very, very excited. This is also the 4th astronaut that is gonna fly on this Dragon vehicle. We had an astronaut, Thomas Pesquet, on Crew-2, followed by Matthias Maurer on Crew-3, and on Crew-4 we have Samantha Cristoforetti. So we are very happy to be able to continue this flight sequence and be back on the Dragon. Andy will stay 6 months on the space station, and in this golden era of utilization, he will do more than 30 European experiments. They focus around climate, health, and space research that's relevant for the people on Earth. I think that this flight doesn't only attest to all the technical capabilities that we have developed today in LEO exploration, but it also demonstrates the absolutely excellent partnership, international partnership, that we have fostered over years. Last year, ESA did extend our participation in the ISS program to 2030. So we have new astronauts that have been assigned recently. So we're looking forward to further cooperation, further flights, and for now we're looking very much forward to the Crew-7 launch. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And joining us virtually, we'll now hear from Mr. Hiroshi Sasaki.
Thank you. I'm Hiroshi Sasaki, Vice President of JAXA, responsible for human space flight and space exploration. First, and on behalf of JAXA, I'd like to thank the NASA's leadership and all the members working so hard for the Crew-7 launch preparations and continuing the ISS operations. This is the 4th straight year of launch of the Japanese astronaut by the Crew Dragon since 2020. I think this symbolizes the close ties between Japan and international partners and appreciate their cooperation to make this happen. For astronaut Satoshi Furukawa, this is the 2nd long-term mission on the ISS. I believe his expertise cultivated in space and on the ground as a medical expert will contribute to the international members on board Crew-7 from 3 different space agencies and ensure the success of the Crew-7. During the Satoshi stay, Japan plans to conduct a variety of experiments ranging from the space exploration, life science, to SDGs-related missions. One example is technical demonstration on the next generation water recovery system. JAXA is proceeding with research and development of the future international space exploration, such as lunar gateway habitation functions and Crew Pressures rover. The water recovery system is a key technology for the habitation functions. Cell gravity sensing is another sample. By discovering the gravity sensing mechanism by the cells in the microgravity environment, we will be able to develop the prevention and treatment methods for muscle atrophy and bone loss in space, as well as for pathological conditions in bedridden patients on the Earth. In addition, collaboration with NASA, JAXA is going to hold the Kibo Robot Programming Challenge, it was open to the students from the United Nations member states and has received more than 1,600 applications from 30 countries and regions. The spring, JAXA selected 2 new astronaut candidates. I believe Satoshi will be a role model for them. We will continuously work hard to play important roles in human spaceflight. Through astronauts and ISS program, JAXA will continue to bring benefits to Earth and operate and preparate for future exploration on the moon and beyond. In addition, together with NASA and the international partners through the Artemis program, we aim to expand human frontier and gain new knowledge for all. Thank you for your attention. ありがとう。
Thank you to all of our briefers for joining us today. We will now move into the question and answer portion of the session. If you're on the phone line, please press *1 to raise your hand and ask a question, and please press *2 to remove your question if it has been asked. Additionally, make sure to announce your name and affiliation and to whom your question is directed, and if possible, please limit one question at a time. We will start here in the room with Gina.
Gina Sinceri, ABC News. I guess this is for Joel. When you talk about a power outage in mission control, what does that mean? The lights go off, the air conditioning went off. What did you see in mission control with the power outage this morning?
Okay, good question. We lost power on the first floor of the building, and so the whole lights, air conditioning on the first floor. Now where the flight controllers were, they're not located on the first floor. They did have lights, but the hardware that's used to power up the command, the telemetry, the voice systems, all that was unavailable and unpowered. Sure.
Okay. We will go to a question on the phone. This one from Jeff Faust.
Good afternoon. A question for Joel. Curious if you have any updates on the investigation into the Soyuz in progress coolant leaks, and if anything more needs to be wrapped up on that before the Soyuz crewed launch in September. Thanks.
Good question, Jeff. Just about a week and a half ago, Ken Bowersox and I were both in Moscow. We met with Roscosmos, we met with Energia and the Star City folks. They continue to look at the what had happened. They've reviewed the procedures for preparing the vehicle. Nothing's changed. They looked at, did they use any new tooling? No new tooling has been changed. They looked at technicians. Did they change out a technician? Again, nothing's changed on that. Today, the conclusion of Roscosmos is that some type of external force was the result of the leak, like some type of debris event. The NASA team has also looked at it, independent of the Russian team, and we also cannot find anything based on the information we've been given by our Russian colleagues of anything other than some type of external force or debris or something else like that. What you saw was a perfectly operating thermal system. Then you had a loss of coolant, and it was a pretty sharp change. And just materials and how they fail, and we just can't reproduce any of that on the ground. So what we'll do is, Steve mentioned, we have our readiness review tomorrow. We'll go through the results of the different investigation team on the U.S. side, and then we'll have a flight readiness review on the 11th, also as mentioned, where we'll do the final work. In parallel, that we continue, Laurel continues training with her cosmonaut colleagues, and in preparation for the September mission.
Thank you. Our next question is from Bill Harwood.
The issue with the ISO valve. Can you provide maybe just a little bit more info on what the concern was? In other words, what is the threat posed by a stuck open ISO valve? And finally for you, I heard you guys might be controlling the Crew-7 launch from Hangar X. Is that true, and would any other flights be ahead of that in terms of switching from the LCC to Hangar X, assuming that's actually happening? Thanks.
I think that was for Benji.
Bill. Thanks for the questions. I'll take the second one first. That's correct. We're controlling this mission from Hangar X to the launch. So this will be the first of our crew missions that we manage from there. So it's a beautiful new facility, and we're excited to be doing that. In terms of that prop valve, that isolation valve, just to be a little bit clearer, that isolation valve is only ever used if the Draco thruster valve starts to leak. Okay, so in other words, it's supposed to stay always open. In this case, though, what we discovered is it was stuck open. So it's a kind of funny nuance, right? Like this valve is supposed to stay open unless there's a problem in the thruster valve itself. In this case, we didn't have a problem in the thruster valve, so it's good. But we did discover that the valve was actually stuck open. So, if it had started to leak, we would have had to, take some mitigations, including there's other valves we can close because there's multiple valves. The system has a lot of redundancy in it. We could have sealed off the bulk of our propellant, so we would have preserved our propellant, and we would have kind of isolated part of the system and rerouted and changed how we were going to operate coming home. But that didn't have to happen in this case. So there was never like a great risk to the crew or to the vehicle, or I'm sorry, to the cargo in this case, or to that vehicle, because we have multiple layers of redundancy and ability to mitigate this, with the hardware and in operation. But just specifically, this valve is actually normally open and is only used when there is a leak elsewhere. But the good news is, though, right, for discovering this kind of thing is that we take a look at from the good news side, I guess, is that it allows us to discover, hey, there is this interesting corrosion issue that we're seeing in a few valves. We need to make sure that we understand that thoroughly and that we have good mitigation for that going forward. So we're working that now. So as always, we always say listen to the hardware, right, and listen to the data, and that's what this is. This is us going, okay, well, our normal checkout process, we discovered something. Now we're going to go and make sure that we apply that across the system. We're learning something, and it'll make us better and safer for the future.
Thank you, Benji. We will come back in the room to Mark Carreau.
I believe this is for Joel Montalbano. During the Northrop Grumman resupply mission, will you be docked, or are there any plans? Will you be docked in a good place, or will there be any plans to do any sort of orbital maneuvering demonstrations to continue your evaluation of its ability to maneuver the station?
Good question. We're going to berth the Northrop Grumman mission to the Node 1 Nadir port, and that'll allow us reboost capability. We do have a requirement when there's a Russian Soyuz at the MR1 or the port right next to it that we don't do a reboost. So that Soyuz won't get there till September. So we'll have from once we get berthed to ISS until that Soyuz gets there an opportunity to do a reboost. Right now we're looking at about 1.5 meters, 1.5 meter per second reboost capability with the vehicle. It's important that we continue to test that capability. As you know, this will be about the third time we've done it with Cygnus, so we're looking forward to continuing using that capability.
All right, and our next question is on the phone with Eric Berger.
Hi, thanks very much for doing this. Question for Ken or Steve, I think. And I just want to get some updates on the other commercial vehicles that we haven't talked about yet. First up is Starliner. How are the investigations going into the parachute issue and I think the flammable tape on the wiring harness? And is there a target for when that mission will fly? And then second is Dream Chaser. We haven't heard too much about it, but, the Vulcan rocket for that has had some delays, but also Dream Chaser does seem to be getting closer to flight. So I'm just wondering what NASA's expectations are for when we might see that cargo mission. Thanks.
So I'll just stay at the front that both of those missions are making steady progress. The challenges are pretty big in doing what they're trying to do. So it's taken longer than they had hoped when they got started. But we're moving forward steadily. And the Dream Chaser question, that probably belongs to Joel. So I'll let him talk about that, and Steve can talk about Starliner. Joel?
So Dream Chaser, as Ken said, we continue to make progress. They're scheduled to go to the Armstrong Test Facility in the next few months to do some testing there. Out of that testing, then they'll be moved to Kennedy Space Center and then prepared for launch. The Sierra team continues to watch the progress of the Vulcan. They are continuing, again, both to watch the Vulcan as well as continue processing on the Dream Chaser. I expect the vehicle to fly next year. First or second quarter is what we're looking at now, but we'll be watching progress and adjust accordingly. I'll hand it over to Steve for Boeing.
Yeah, thanks for the question on Starliner. You know, when we found the problems with the parachute joint and the P213 tape, the flammable tape, back in June, we took a step back and decided to pause really everything that we're doing with the vehicle. And as you may remember, there was an ASAP recommendation to do the same thing. So on the NASA side, we sort of stepped back and we're taking a look at really all aspects of flight preparation. Relative to the major items, in terms of the parachute system, the team has made a lot of great progress between the Boeing and NASA team. We actually have a joint identified that will meet the factor of safety of 2.0 for the main and drogue parachutes. That joint is in testing right now, and we're in the middle of looking at that joint and figuring out how to get it into the chutes for flight. And so that team has made an incredible amount of progress. There was a recent technical interchange meeting at the supplier of the parachute system. They went through all the other joints on the parachute, and we don't have any concerns for all those other joints. We actually executed a parachute test on not the main parachute, but the forward heat shield parachute. And that parachute system performed really well, and that system is in good shape for flight. And then relative to the tape issue, the flammable tape, the team has actually got into the vehicle and is in the process of removing a lot of that tape out of Starliner. They're in the crew compartment area with panels off, and as of yesterday reported, they probably removed about 3 pounds of that tape. We also think we have another non-flammable tape that we can apply. This tape was applied to wire bundles to really protect those bundles from work in the area or chafing or rubbing during flight. And so we've been able to remove a lot of that tape, and that work's progressing really well. So that, you know, the work on Starliner is progressing well. We need to step back a little bit and take a look at how all this work lines up. We're not really ready to talk about a launch opportunity yet. We're going to work the technical issues first, and then we'll sit down with the Boeing team when the time is right and pick a launch target.
Okay. Our next question on the phone is from Marcia Dunn.
Oh, hi. This is for Joel. I'm wondering, have you actually relocated mission control operations and staff out of JSC and out of Houston? I recall there being a command post many miles away in case everyone there in Houston needs to evacuate for a hurricane. And if that's the case, did you already have, like, controllers there at the ready just in case? You said you were prepared for a possible power outage given the work. And is this a first, or has something like this happened before? Thanks.
Let's see, the flight control team stayed in Houston. The facilities, the Johnson Space Center remains operational. And like I said, we had that issue on the first floor where the flight control team was. They were on the, not on the first floor, so they're able to operate the vehicle. So again, we were ready to go. We do have the capability, as you said, if we did have bad weather or some other activity that we were not allowed to operate in the Mission Control Center, were we able to move, but we did not move today. And then you had a second part. What was the second part of your question?
Is this the first such occurrence like this, or have there been episodes before where you've lost touch with the station temporarily?
I'll say that this is the first occurrence where we've actually activated the backup control hardware and used it in Building 30. Human spaceflight, you know, throughout human spaceflight, you'll do have occurrences where maybe you'll do an upgrade in the building, a software upgrade that might not go as well, and you'll lose power or command communication to the crew for 30 minutes, or maybe if you miss a satellite pass, you'll lose it. So it has happened before, but this is the first time where we've actually fired up all the equipment and then operated in the Mission Control Center in Building 30 here.
Thank you. And the next question comes from Will Robinson Smith.
Yes, hi. Thanks for doing this afternoon. Follow up on Bill Harwood's question to Benji Reed. Will SpaceX be controlling either the Falcon Heavy for the EchoStar mission or another launch prior to Crew-7 from Hangar X, or will Crew-7 be the first from there? And then for Joel, does NASA/SpaceX plan to launch the CRS-29 mission from Pad 40 if it'll be ready by then, or will that next cargo resupply with Cargo Dragon still be from 39A? Thanks.
I can start with with EchoStar and the Hangar X facility. The first flight out of Hangar X will be the EchoStar. Actually, SpaceX has flown many flights already out of Hangar X, the Starlink flights. EchoStar will be the first heavy out of Hangar X. And we have been practicing for Crew-7 already with SpaceX, the launch team there in Hangar X. And so we've done a long simulation where we start at launch and go all the way through docking using that facility. We also flight followed one of the Starlink flights out of that facility. So we've been preparing all along to use that facility for launch. And we'll see if Benji's back online.
Yeah, hey guys, sorry about that. I got double booted. But yeah, no, but Steve got it right. We're controlling multiple missions out of Hangar X already and in the run up to Crew-7, so no worries there.
And on SpaceX 29, we'll launch that off of Pad 39A. The first ISS mission off the Slick 40 pad, Space Launch Complex 40, will be the Northrop Grumman mission. We're targeting that in December, Northrop Grumman 20.
Okay. Our next question comes from Robert Perlman.
Hi. For Eric Vanderwall, you mentioned the number, the first that Andy Mogensen will be setting. Expedition 70 is also the first time that ESA has led the design of the Expedition patch. I know it might be a small milestone, but how did that come to be that it's taken 69 missions for someone other than NASA or Roscosmos to design a patch, and did ESA specifically request the opportunity?
Well, I don't have a lot of background on it, but I think every partner comes forward with proposals, and they look at it and they jointly decide what's the best patch proposal, and then they go from there. There was no specific request from ESA to be the driver.
All right. Our next question is from Micah Maidenberg.
Hey there. Hey, Benji, with the ground equipment issue, did SpaceX conduct checks at Vandenberg or other company sites to see if the problem was potentially kind of common across, various sites, or was this seen as isolated to 39A? And then did that issue cause any launch delays, or did you have to shift any flights from 39A? Thanks.
Hey, that's a great question. It's a very important one because, right, when you have any kind of an issue, one of the things you want to do is you want to look across your fleet or your system to make sure you're not seeing that issue in a similar situation, similar configuration or application. And that's exactly what we did. In fact, when it happened there at 39A, we immediately looked across all of our facilities where we have these kinds of heat exchangers. And actually, as a precaution, we'd immediately, blocked off so that personnel couldn't approach those, and to ensure that as we were digging into each one's configuration, understanding the design, that there couldn't be that kind of an issue. So we took immediate proactive action, and then we assessed all of them, in design, and ensured that none of them would have the same kind of an issue with a trapped, liquid going to gas. So I appreciate that. That's a great question. Thank you.
Next question on the phone comes from Chris Lazzarino.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. I'm calling from Kansas Alumni Magazine at the University of Kansas. So obviously I'm calling about Laurel. She will be our fourth Jayhawk to fly in space, so everyone here is very excited about that. I assume it's an interesting, exciting time at NASA whenever you have an astronaut preparing to make their first trip into space. And I'm wondering, could Joel or Ken comment, please, just about Laurel's progress since completing her training and what makes her the right candidate for this mission? Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
So she's been doing awesome in training. I had the opportunity to talk to Laurel multiple times. In fact, when her mission was delayed, she took some time and did, I'll say, flight following with myself and my deputy, whereas she participated in our meetings and was kind of looking at the space station from the non-astronaut side. She's ready to go. She's got the right attitude. She's got energy. You know, what I look for on first flyers is asking questions and the energy and the excitement, and I see all that in Laurel. And so I'm excited to see it, and Ken and I are excited to go down to Baikonur with her in September and be there for her launch. Let me hand it over to Ken.
Yeah, Joel and I got to visit with Laurel down at Baikonur when she was back up for Frank Rubio's launch. And we're really looking forward to seeing her go out to the pad and launch into space. And I know she's really looking forward too. She's demonstrated great flexibility, smarts, energy, and I know she'll continue that on orbit and when she gets back.
All right, our next question on the line comes from Lenka White.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Question for Joel, please. How was your cooperation with Roscosmos on Crew-7 in comparison to Crew-6? And were there any changes following the Soyuz accident? Thank you so much.
Our cooperation with Roscosmos hasn't changed at all. We continue. As I said, Ken and I were over in Moscow just a week and a half ago or so, and talking with our Russian colleagues, both technical discussions, and then Ken and I also had some social events with our colleagues. In Houston, we continue to have Russian colleagues in Mission Control Center working side by side with our U.S. specialists. Again, nothing's changed. So we're ready to go, and no major changes in our cooperation.
All right, and those are all of the questions that we have today. However, it's not the last you will hear from us. We'll be back for the Crew News Conference where you can speak to the astronauts themselves at 1 p.m. Central Time. Thank you everyone for joining us. We are looking forward to the Crew-7 mission now on August 17th, and shortly thereafter, Laurel O'Hara's flight to the International Space Station on September 15th. That'll do it for us for now, and we'll see you later this afternoon.